I'm Julianne Neal of JA Media Productions, and I'm so happy to be here on behalf of the EQUUS Film and Arts Fest in preparation for this year's 2021 virtual festival. I'm here speaking with Neda DeMayo, who is the founder of Return to Freedom, which is a national wild horse conservation organization. Neda, welcome to the call.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate you sitting down and spending time with me, because I can only imagine how busy you are. After watching parts of the film, The Mustangs, I can't even fathom. And really, that's why we're here today, specifically to speak about the Mustangs. But before we do that, I really would like to hear more about your organization and what you do. I know there are two sides of it from what I've seen. So the sanctuary side, and then just the whole organization, charitable organization. So can you tell us a little bit about Return to Freedom?
Yeah, thank you. Return to Freedom, I started Return to Freedom in 1997, and I knew I wanted to have a sanctuary. But I also knew that we needed to educate people, because there's only so many horses any piece of land or any person or any people's or land or sanctuary can save and hold. And horses live quite a while, as you know, so it's a commitment. And the more that I delved into the political side of the issue, I knew that to really help the horses, wild horses in America and the burros, unfortunately, it was political. Wild horses and burros are probably the only species out on our federal lands that do not create any kind of economic income, profits for any special interest groups. So, historically, they've been perceived as freeloaders or pests or invasive species. And that is what got the fire in my belly going, to pursue and consistently stay with this cause. For me, the sanctuary is a beautiful venue to save the horses you're saving and to educate people and have programs, because not everyone is going to go out to the middle of nowhere on some of these very vast, rugged, remote, desolate parts of our public lands to see wild horses.
Right.
And even if you do, you don't always get to see them. They travel far,
Well, I know we were in Arizona at one point, and somebody said, be on the lookout. And, as hard as you're looking, you don't always get that opportunity. But for you and people who visit the sanctuary, it sounds like you have more than one location. How many acres are we talking?
Well, we started out on 300 acres in Lompoc, California, which is just north of Santa Barbara. And it's in Santa Barbara County, which is a nice place to be. I wanted to be somewhere where we could reach people, so people come by, and we have, this has turned into pretty much the program center. So we do a lot of tours and a variety of programs, including safaris. And then a few years ago, I think probably 6 years ago now, a wonderful family, they were supporters and donors of ours, bought a 2,000-acre ranch in San Luis Obispo, and we launched the Mustang Conservator program for people that have resources and land and wanted to make it available to a nonprofit to, have a satellite sanctuary. So we started doing that, and then we have done that in Northern California as well, way up north, up by Alturas, California, where we also lease pasture for horses as well, because we've been doing this for about almost 25 years now.
Oh, wow.
So, a lot of the horses are living into their mid-30s, late 30s. So we have a growing senior population, as well as the never-ending need to provide a sanctuary for other horses that are continuing to be captured and taken off of their home range.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, that senior care, I have an older thoroughbred, and it's like just making sure his weight is right and teeth and all that stuff. That must be a tremendous amount of vet and farrier and dentistry and all that. How do you manage that?
Yeah, it's a challenge. One of the things that I always remind people when they say, I want to start a sanctuary, and they think they can just throw the horses out there and let them do their thing. Well, you could, but the issue is that now you've put them in your fences, and now they're your wild horses. You're responsible for what happens there. So We have, had to create an infrastructure to safely handle the horses, and we have horses in different stages of socialization. Some like people, and some we gentle, but we primarily have horses that have come off the range that are maintained in their natural state. We focus on keeping bonded herd families together. When I started Return to Freedom in 1998, when we opened the sanctuary, we began by relocating intact family bands that were being captured on horseback up in Oregon and then Nevada on Fish and Wildlife lands. Fish and Wildlife did not have a helicopter waiver at the time. And so they hired wranglers to remove them. And we said, yes, we'll take some of the horses. We just got the 300-acre property, but you need to keep them in their original family bands and their bachelor bands. So the smaller bands of younger stallions and mature stallions that don't have a harem of mares, we call them bachelor bands, and they're out on the range consistently challenging other stallions to acquire and create their own family bands. So that's how we started. And I knew immediately that to do this, we were going to need to address reproduction. So I was introduced to Dr. Lou at Davis, and then, of course, Dr. Kirkpatrick, the late Dr. Kirkpatrick, who became a very good friend and confidant and mentor, who was the director of the Science and Conservation Center in Billings, Montana. And we started using the native PZP. It's a non-hormonal reversible vaccine for the mares. And that is how we have addressed maintaining and slowing down reproduction. Some of the mares don't respond to it. So once in a while, you do get a foal. But primarily, we've had a 91 to 98% efficacy at the sanctuary. So it's been a wonderful way to allow people to observe and learn about horses directly from the horses through sensitive observation out within the herd without interfering.
So, I read through your website, you have recommendations for wild horse management, and then your take on preserving specific bloodlines and that sort of thing. How do you see that? I mean, I guess, is it a model for what you think could happen in the wild and in other locations, or is this something that's just specific to you that would be hard to replicate somewhere else?
No, we obviously we had to walk that road to see if it's viable. And the intention behind it was that it is the foundation of our advocacy and educational work. And the reason is we want to see roundups end. We in no way support that. That's an archaic, tragic, expensive, inhumane management method. And unfortunately, the Bureau of Land Management was tasked with managing our wild horses on our public lands. And the other problem is that our public lands are managed under a multiple use mandate. So these are just directly right there. You see the problem. There's the poor horses, they don't stand a chance. But the Wild Horse and Burro Act, was passed for their preservation and protection in 1971, and it has been gutted with amendments ever since. So it's been a conflict, it's been a controversy that will not go away. It's the battle over the land, the grazing, the water on our public lands. And you've got everything out there from campers, skidooing, hiking, livestock, private livestock, grazing permits, energy resourcing, all those kinds of things. So everything is in competition out there, and the poor horse is seen as this, trespasser basically to a lot of people, but they will always be loved by not only the American people, but internationally. The American Mustang is a symbol of freedom. So, how do we work with a government agency that really doesn't want the job with all the emotion that is behind this issue. So it triggers a lot of emotion. And historically, the government agencies, the employees that work for the agency, I'm not saying they're all bad. There's some people that really care about the horses and want to see the program improve, the Wild Horse and Burro program. But as a whole, the culture in that agency does not make the Wild Horse and Burro program, even those in the Wild Horse and Burro program, do not make it a priority.
Right.
And they perceive the citizens who are emotional about it as, too emotional.
Right.
They don't know what they're talking about, those kind of things. And there's a lot of very intelligent advocates out there, people that are savvy with horses, people that have gotten deeply involved with wild horses. Some have adopted them. You also have a lot of people that are just emotional and sitting at their social media keyboards all day.
Sure.
So there's a lot of noise.
Sure.
And there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of sometimes, someone will throw a number out there like 90,000, 100 and something $1 million, all these kinds of things. But when you have to dig through the weeds to really understand, how does this big machine work, and how do we make a change with this big machine that doesn't like change? The Bureau of Land Management, as in general, my opinion is that they know how to do roundups, they know how to remove horses, and they like when there's a lot of infighting, it creates inertia, and they're happy with that because they can keep doing what they're doing. To make a paradigm shift, to make fertility control on the range a priority across the West, and it's a challenge. This is not an easy thing. Would take a grand effort and really a cultural shift, within the agency to make it a priority, and to create the infrastructure needed, the education and training needed, and to have more staff to be able to address it properly so that it's successful. Every time a program fails, it's an excuse not to do it. So it's really important to take these things, seriously and sincerely, and move them forward pragmatically with a plan, like year 1, we're doing this, year 2, year 3, year 4, and really start applying it, because today, we're seeing the problem exacerbated. People say, do you think there's a wild horse overpopulation? That's a common question. Personally, it's subjective.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, compared to what? Compared to elk? Compared to cattle?
Right.
So, so for me personally, we don't, Return to Freedom doesn't support the government set AML, or appropriated management level. The appropriate management level nationally is set at 26,900, which is the general population they want to see across, about 26, 27 million acres of land. And of course, they share that with millions of privately owned livestock. The way they manage the livestock is different. They go on and off. The horses stay there. Yes, there's a lot to consider in the details. But I think when you really step back and you look at it, you think, these are fragile habitats. It's true. But there is a solution. We can't let all those things intimidate us, because one of the solutions that I obviously advocate for is addressing reproduction on the range in a humane manner, not with IUDs or some of these outlandish ideas for wild animals, but the native PCP has proven itself for over 25 years to be harmless. I mean, our mares are living well into their 30s. There's
obviously,
I mean, it doesn't, if a horse dies, it doesn't kill a predator, those kinds of things. So that is why we promote it, because, and always staying open to another alternative. And, but the main point is you need to step back and look at each herd management area on it and analyze it independently of the others, because every environment's a little different, and it creates a different behavior in the animals there. But there's a lot of things we can do to be more progressive and think more progressively about holistic range management in general, especially as we have more drought and wildfires affecting and impacting these areas.
Areas. Right, right.
You know,
Well, I love the educational aspect of what you do, and that seems to be like one of the prongs as you've got all the management things together. And you pointed out before the children and the letter campaign with Wild Horse Annie and everybody else in 71 was
mhm.
how things changed. So do you see children and not necessarily just children, but young people, our youth now coming into this field? Are you getting help from that age, that generation? And do you see that as a possibility for some sustainable cultural shifts?
I think it is probably the change that needs to happen is as so from my experience being here for 25 years, not 24 years with our headquarters in Lompoc, we've had a lot of, we had Spirit, the horse that was the Kiger Mustang Stallion that DreamWorks donated after he was the muse for the animators for the animated feature film.
Wow.
So it's so interesting because back then in 2003, a lot of the wee ones that came that were passionate and grew up watching that movie, well, now a lot of those um, young adults are coming here as interns or we hire them and it's really it's really fun. It's
Awesome.
like, oh my God, is that much time gone by? It's like, but they're just lovely. And a lot of that generation and the generation that went before them and it's coming after them, they're very environmentally conscious, a lot of them. And the ones that are, you just hope that they're going to move into some of these agencies and start to influence it, excuse me, start to influence the
Mhm,
shift that needs to happen because it ultimately it's a cultural shift.
mhm.
We have enough science to prove things. I mean, what works, what doesn't work, but you have to have the desire and
Yeah.
there can't be a bias. One of the things that bothers me so much about when there is any analysis of the impact to the range and they're analyzing horses, they isolate the horse. A lot of the research, yeah, it's very frustrating. In 2013, for example, the National Academy of Science did a report and they were told to focus on the impact from the horses. And I've spoken to some of the scientists that were involved in it, and they said anytime that they wanted to look at the, other impacts coming to the same ranges where the horses were, they were directed away from that.
Wow.
And so I think, there really needs to just be a complete audit,
Right.
an audit of the Bureau of Land Management, an audit of our public lands and taking a new look. Um, a lot of people, it's scary because it's kind of like, be careful what you ask for. Because if
That's true.
you know what I mean? If you
Yeah.
start looking into range health this year, it's not going to look good for the horses
Mhm.
or livestock.
Right.
Or you know what I mean? It's like the drought doesn't care if it's a horse or a cow
Yeah.
or a sheep. So
Right.
um but it's a challenge to try to work with all sides and to try to take the hostility out of the issue
Mhm.
so that everybody can start to talk because whether I agree or not, whether I like it or not, livestock ranching is legally allowed. The permits have been there for a lot longer than I've been alive, for, decades.
Mhm.
And they have a legal right to use our federal lands for
Right.
grazing private livestock.
It's just
So we
finding
have,
the balance and knowing how to make that happen. Yeah.
yeah, it's tricky, sometimes, we say, well, if there was no privately owned livestock grazing on the herd management areas where the horses are designated to be,
Mhm.
um, that would be good. Well, it would for a while, but there's a limit to everything. I mean, our public lands have changed over the last few hundred years. It's not like the 15 or 1600s any longer, and there's barbed wire fencing up, and there's a lack of predation in a lot of the areas, largely due to livestock ranching.
Okay.
And but also just in general, a lot of predators are going to go after smaller prey.
Hmm.
So you're at some point, even if livestock ranching stopped on designated herd management areas, at some point you might have to step in with fertility control.
Sure, sure.
But we're at a place just on the planet where
Yeah,
we have to look at conservation.
right. That's a lot of the work that we're doing. My partner and I,
Yeah.
Bruce, are doing with the
Yeah.
mental aspect of everything, and the horse as sort of the canary in the coal mine for what we're doing in our society. And it's just,
Exactly.
it's crazy. A lot of things that you have to figure out. But I think, to me, watching the film, The Mustangs, Stephen addressed it so beautifully throughout the film, but by the end, or the last little segment when it got to you all with Return to Freedom, I was just so moved by the way that everything was presented, and the handling of the topic, and the way that you were
Okay.
able to, from the minute that it shows you, bringing the horses into the corral and all that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the film and your role in it.
Okay.
I know, from doing films and seeing people who have been a subject of a film before, or part of a subject or whatever, it's hard to see yourself on the big screen, and it's hard to hard to hear the things that you've said or whatever. How did you feel the first time you saw the film for real, once it was all big screen type or whatever? How did you feel about it?
Oh my God. I just finished chemotherapy treatment for breast cancer. So I was like, oh my God, just like, it was just sort of, because that was a few years ago now.
Yeah.
But I guess I felt like I wish that I had said a little bit more about what we're talking about now, because you don't know what the whole film is about. And the
Right.
particular group of horses that we were releasing had come from the Cold Creek area in Nevada. And that is an area for sure where they have water, but they have a serious lack of grazing resources.
Mm-hmm.
So occasionally the horses are extremely undernourished. And that's happened a few times in the last 10 years, where they've had to remove horses that were pretty much almost skeletal, some
Right.
of them.
Right.
And, but in general, my experience is when I'm out on the range, even in ranges where they're about to remove large numbers, like did this summer, the horses are looking great.
Yeah.
The majority, I'm talking about the majority of horses.
Yeah. It should.
And yeah. And so you're going, and they look good. They look good. Then they go through a holding pen process. And depending on who's managing the holding pens, they can look pretty bad in a very short while after all the stress.
Right.
So that in the film, we were releasing some horses to reunite them with some of their herd mates that had been captured a few years prior, that truly were really thin on the range, and they were really suffering, and that was for sure. But I just wish that wasn't the only representation of what's happening on the range, because some of them they're so resilient and they're so resourceful. And some of the problems with some of the herd management areas is when we do have fire, drought, et cetera, and there's a limit, they'll wander off of the boundaries of the HMA or the herd management area. And through no fault of their own, they are now going to be removed. And
Yeah.
what we're seeing today, this summer, are mass removals that just break your heart. And some of them are happening in areas that are easy to track the horses. Photographers have been going there for years. The horses are somewhat acclimated to people being 10 feet away, 5 feet away, 20 feet away. And that makes it, and they're documented. There's photos of them, some are named. And the reason I say that's a perfect um, scenario for certain to start a good fertility control program, because you've already got the horses identified, and now you just have to show up and do the
Yeah.
work. And so when I see these, like the Onaki herd and the Sandwash Basin herd and what they're doing in Wyoming today, what's happening in Wyoming right now is sad. This is a checkerboarded area with public land, private land. Goes back to the railroad time, the way the lands got divided up, and the horses step over an imaginary line, and they're in private land. So you've got a, grazing association there that wants to really get these herds down, and they're decimating them. And it's, I think there's better solutions than to do that.
Definitely.
I think there's just way better solutions, and it's our fault. The
Right.
agency, like with the Cold Creek horses that you saw in the film,
Mhm.
if they had been implementing a successful fertility control program, even for 5 years before that, but they've had the opportunity to do that for 10 years or more, you'd see less births. It
Mhm.
wouldn't wipe them out, but it would slow down the population growth enough that you could catch up with the birth rate.
Right.
And, horses could live their lives on the range. And that's what we all want. A healthy range is going to support all the species that live there.
Yeah.
And a healthy horse is going to enjoy living on the range with
Right.
his family band the way
And
he was meant to be.
yeah.
And that saves millions of dollars in the end. So
Yeah.
I'm happy that you're letting me say this, because it's important to acknowledge that a lot of the horses look fantastic out there. And as climate change is affecting all of us, and these ranges are sensitive, and you have areas where animals, not just horses,
Mhm.
overgraze,
Mhm.
and areas where they undergraze. And
Right.
what I've learned by having a sanctuary is undergrazing is just as dangerous to the habitat as overgrazing. So a lot of there's methods that exist out there. There's a better way,
Definitely.
whether it's a combination of fertility control, but also just in range practice.
Mhm.
And I've learned a lot of that from some of our donors that are implementing, um, like Savory Institute methods to their ranches. And you can do it with cattle, but you can do it with horses too. So it's just keeping them moving. They need to be moving. And I think that's what I think there's going to be a combination of things to rejuvenate the soil and to keep our ranges healthy, and
Yeah.
keep our wild horses wild and free, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I think one of the emotional scenes for me in the film was when Annalene, which was one of the mayors from early 2013 or so, and one of the people with you knew when she was born, had followed her. I mean, like you said, there are people who document, and that would be just exactly the way
That's
to follow it. And then what was a little bit heartbreaking for me was that you had this herd or this group, this family band of 6, and then 3 are adopted out and 3 stay with you. And I guess, I'm personalizing things here, but how many times do you have people who do come in and who know the particular horses that you have and follow them along, and then they're adopted out? Is that heartbreaking for you, or are you happy when that happens?
Oh, well, it just depends. I'm trying to think of what horses that was in the film, but
It was paint, a beautiful paint, and she was just lovely. I
well, Annalene's still with us.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
we didn't adopt her out. We filmed her and her two friends being released
Mhm.
at the San Luis Obispo property.
Yeah.
and and it was really funny because she was just they were actually about to meet up with the Cold Creek horses that they knew from the range that had been rounded up 3 years before that. And then the drone scared them.
Oh,
So,
no.
yeah, but they're all still there. They're at the sanctuary. Once we release them at the sanctuary, they're there. They're
That
home.
okay, good,
Yeah.
good.
Sometimes we have horses that come in, and they're really young and they're really friendly. So
Mm,
when we picked up Annalene and the other two boys, there were 3 younger horses that were super friendly.
uh,
And the Cold Creek herd is generally pretty friendly because they live in that area in Nevada, sort of Wheeler Pass herd management area, and it borders that road that goes to Vegas. And it, so a
ah,
lot of times tourists are trying to feed them, and they wander into the town there. Those horses, 2 went together to our friends that have 1,000 acres nearby. So they're living the good life.
yeah, that's
With
nice.
10 other horses. And Maven, a black mare, stayed with us. and she's actually been adopted by our staff vet. We have a staff vet now, which is a game changer.
That's
It's
great.
fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
You'd almost have to, with the level of work that you're doing, you'd almost have to do that. So
Yeah. At this point, it's really helpful. So,
yeah, yeah. Well, you made a very powerful statement in the film that your goal is to create a sustainable management plan for the wild horses and burros on their rightful ranges. And I
Mm.
think, to me, that in a nutshell says it all. But with that said, if that were to happen, do you still see yourself there at the sanctuary doing the same thing with those horses, or do you feel like, if that in perfect world land, if that
In a
ever did
perfect world, if a sanctuary wasn't necessary,
yeah. What would you
I
do?
would be out on the range camping.
Yes.
That's what I do, for that. For me, a holiday vacation is going to the range, and I've been to many ranges, but I'd like to spend more time out there like I used to years ago.
Yeah.
And the, the thing is that's sad is, whenever you've got wild horses coming into the private sector, there's a large percentage, like any other horse, that end up in the wrong hands, and they end up in the slaughter pipeline, and or the auction, the kill pen, the auctions. And there's people that focus on that aspect of wild horse rescue as well. And it's sometimes you just think, oh my God, when is this going to end? There needs to be a grand awakening, in human consciousness. It's about how we treat each other, how we treat the land, how we treat all species. And short of that, I think that's what I'm also passionate about, is I want to be part of that.
Yes.
I want to be part of that. And so what I know horse, I understand horses. I can offer this. This is what I can do. I can't save elephants. I don't have the right tools to do that.
Yeah.
But I think everybody does what they can, and we strive to be understood and not misunderstood. So
Right.
thank you for letting me speak. And
Oh,
we're always in any room, we're always going to stick up for the horses, and we share a lot of the sentiments as our fellow advocates in the wild horse community. It's confusing. It's a very, how do I say this? I want to say corrupt. There's a very, corrupt
mm-hmm.
um, political structure in place, for a lot of the way that we manage these agencies, and it doesn't have to be, let these agencies evolve, please. Just
Right.
let them move and have more progressive solutions, humane, and be humane.
Right.
We need to restore our humanity in a lot of these areas, and the way we treat the horse I truly believe this. If we do right by these horses, it's going to shift a lot, because
Right.
we can and we should.
And we
So
absolutely should. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I have one last question for you, unless there's something else you want to talk about, but I have one specific question for you. I, you've been a horse lover since early age. I can tell, and I know
Hmm.
same for me. Is
Hmm.
there one in particular that has been your heart horse?
Oh my gosh, there's been a few. Um, so one is Tajrada, an Arabian mare I have here now. She's about 31 years old. Um, but I had a stallion, a golden Palomino stallion setter. He died a few years ago. And I miss him every day. I had like a connection with him, like his presence was like a human presence to me. It's very
Mm.
interesting. And I miss him a lot. Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah. Well, that's why we do. I believe that's why we do what we do, because
yeah.
you have one of those, and I can think of the big picture and all of that, but then I can also hone in on my Winston, or and
Yeah.
specific ones that you think that's why we do what we do. But
Yeah.
I appreciate so much you spending all this time with me talking about it, and I
Thank
think
you.
what you're doing is just phenomenal.
Thank you so much. I guess the one thing I didn't say is what you almost brought up earlier is the sanctuary also does, you're right, give us the opportunity to learn more about the horses and their story. And I don't think their story's been told yet. I think we're still finding out more about the horse. And, you know, a lot of people don't know that the horse is native to this continent and they went through all their adaptations here and into the modern horse we know today.
Right.
And from here, they spread throughout the world, you know, over the Bering Land Bridge with many other species, some that are gone, mammoths, etc. But they, you know, went across the Iranian Plateau, Eurasia, they went and dispersed throughout the world. And it was an ongoing migration until the Bering Land Bridge parted. But we know that the horse went through that adaptation here.
Right.
And it's the same horse biologically. We also, I think, are going to find out or are finding out that maybe the horse maybe didn't completely disappear from the North American continent during the last ice age. I think there's some new evidence surfacing about that too. And one of my favorite people is Dr. Ross McPhee he works at the Museum of Natural History. He created that whole horse exhibit that traveled.
Yes.
And, you know, he's just such a kind, amazing, intelligent person. So I really enjoy his work. So if anyone gets a chance to go and see that, you know, the installation at the museum, it's always enlightening. But I think we're just finding out more and more, and in learning more about the horses, I've met different strains, if you will, of the early, you know, what you would call the Spanish barb horses that came into North America with Hernando de Soto, like the Choctaw horses, and other Spanish barb strains that came in and were the foundation of the Mustang in America. And later larger breeds came in from Europe, you know, to plow the fields and draft horses and whatnot. So the American wild horse of today is very diverse. You know, it's not a breed. It's made up of many different breeds, each tell the story of the area where they are. So it's really interesting. So we do have conservation strains at the sanctuary as well that are disappearing. I know whether in working with people like Dr. Philip Sponenberg and people like that to do our part to conserve some of these unique color alleles and genetics, things like that. So I have a little, that's the horsewoman in me. That's my little,
well, that's fascinating because Bruce and I have had a lot of contact with the Abaco Island Project folks.
Oh, right.
And that breed, the Spanish, you know, descent, and the breed is now extinct. Those horses are gone from, and we've talked about, you know, they collected, Bruce went down and collected tissue when the last horse died, Nunky died. And it's there if they could ever set up a cloning thing or whatever, but I don't know that that's something that we want to go into. But just the comparisons of the environment and how that affected the horses, and it's all fascinating to me. So the educational side of what you do is just
right. Yeah, it's been a wonderful journey. And I'm grateful.
People come and see. Can people just drop in and visit, or what do they have to do to come and see you? Or to see the horses?
They have to schedule a tour because we, you know, we're working all the time. So we have specific tour days, and then we also have private tours. And people can contact us at programs@returntofreedom.org, and our staff will take care of them for tours and such. And they can go on our website, returntofreedom.org, to find out more. And they can either contact us by phone or email. So
I certainly hope they will. And I've had the best time talking to you today. So
me too.
Next vacation day I get from school, I'm gonna be on the phone and see if I can come out and schedule a tour. So
Oh, that's great.
But thank you, Neda. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
The Mustang is the most American animal. Strong, fast. He was the king of the plains. The ponies that the good guy rides are Mustangs. But the reality in the West was something really different. By 1970, it was at the brink of annihilation. Today, wild horses exist where we do not. In fact, after a century of decline, wild horse populations have been growing and growing. Right now, there's at least 80,000 wild horses living on public land, and nearly 50,000 in government storage. We now have an icon of freedom who's become a ward of the state. And I thought that there must be an interesting story behind that. Go to the places where wild horses are to really try and find out where we came from, where we're going, and how we got to where we are today.
They have all the ability in the world, but they don't have a voice. These horses, literally less than 120 days ago, never had human hands on them.
His job is really going to be just to bond with some veterans and maybe show them what a cool horse and Mustang can be.
If you bring your anger or you bring your bad day into it, they're going to respond to it.
Mustangs can look into your soul.
Thank you for giving me back my life.
It's a little bit of our history still left to actually go out and see a wild horse running free.
Yeah, we are a bunch of grandmas, and we are out darting. We have worked to lower the birth rate of the foals. By reducing their population growth, we aim to keep them free.
Ah, you got her!
It's freedom. To know that all you have is where you stand.
Mustangs are basically a living embodiment of the America that we want. And we've got to find a way to preserve it, because in doing so, we preserve ourselves and the land that we love.